All right, should we start though?
Yeah.
Okay. Welcome, everybody. We're actually expecting about like 50 people in person. I think there are, I just came from an event where I know some folks are coming from there. There's sports stuff, there's all sorts of things. But welcome everybody who's here in person. Welcome to those of you who are joining us via live stream. Rabbi NB and I are very pleased to be here. It became clear a couple of weeks ago that we really wanted to provide a forum, a space, an opportunity for us to share stories and questions, and for Rabbi and I to provide a little bit of our rabbinic perspective on what's happening and what some of our reactions might be.
And how to differentiate between what is being said and what is true to the best we can understand it.
So we want to start just by opening it up to all of you. As I look out here in the sanctuary, we have a number of students like high school cusp of college, meaning you guys will graduate very shortly, and one college student, Madison. I think others will, as I said, with all the other events, be joining us. And parents can also share. So, anyone have a story?
And what I will also say is if you're online and would like to share, you can email info@tiwestport.org. We will see the questions or your comments and we will be able to share them as well. And this is anything, what made you uncomfortable, things you have questions about, things you don't understand that you're like, how do we understand this as Jews? We want to hear all the questions or all the thoughts so that we can be helpful if possible.
And when you share a story, introduce yourself, and if you're a student, what school you go to or will be going to. Who has an experience to share?
Oh, you can do this.
So stand up.
Oh, I have to stand.
Stand up, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Madison. I go to Lehigh University.
I couldn't tell.
Oh, yes. At the beginning of fall semester, I found out that one of my friends was pro-Palestine, and struggling with that or figuring out how to manage that friendship was really hard. So how do you go about keeping a boundary but also being friends with someone?
Great.
She's also Palestinian, so.
Where is Palestine? What does it mean to free Palestine?
Yeah.
Is part of that. And
Yes.
do you want to share what you called me about?
Pretty much that. how to navigate the friendship, how to communicate with her about the topic, if I
Yeah.
wanted to approach her about the topic.
Yeah.
I think there are factual questions. I want to separate factual questions, and I'll call it interpersonal questions. How can I approach someone? Right? But someone could be friend, classmate, teacher, professor, campus administrator, right? So I'll just shorten it this way. Is that all right?
For those of you off to school in the fall or who are contemplating college, do you have questions about how to handle this on campus or how to understand how to talk about it? Is that part of why you're here? Seeing no reactions. No. To which? That's a good reason. Are you at all concerned about how to address Israel
That is an okay
on campus?
reason.
Less than my dad might be, but yes, still.
So let me ask this question. It's a great question, Jacob. Why do you think there's a gap between what you're thinking about and what dad or mom is thinking about?
Not actually sure. I've never thought about that. I don't know. It might be because I feel like my dad might be more connected to Judaism than I might be. So then he would also be more connected to the issues.
Fair? Yep.
Yeah.
Fair?
Anyone else here because your parents made you come? No? So why did you want to come? You don't have to introduce yourself. Just say why you wanted to come.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. This is a community.
I'm Andrew. I'm a senior at Staples. I'll be attending Amherst College next year. I wanted to come just to try to get a sense of how I can interact with others who may not agree with what I particularly agree with, and how to how to respond in a respectful yet meaningful way.
Thank you, Andrew.
That's a really good question.
Mia, will you?
Hi, I'm Mira. I'm a senior at Hopkins School, and next year I'll be attending Emory University. I'm here 40% because my parents made me, and 60% because I just want to develop a better understanding of how to approach discourse, especially in a new environment, around such a divisive and often colluded issue.
I will say it's also hard to talk about Israel because it feels like you have to know exactly what you believe in order to talk to everyone else. And what I heard, Jacob, right? What I heard from Jacob is, well, I don't know if I have enough to say about it. And it's hard when you don't have enough information to have a conversation. So maybe part of it being here is having enough information to have a conversation so you feel knowledgeable enough. Want to share anything?
Oh, hi, I'm Alexis. I'm a sophomore at Emory University, so welcome.
There you go.
Emory was really good for a really long time. We have a really big Jewish community there. And then all of a sudden, it kind of went really down south, and there was a lot of graffiti, a lot of protests. It was hard because I have a lot of friends in Jewish frats who were getting yelled at. People would pull into the driveway of the frat houses and scream at them. And my roommate also went to a couple pro-Palestine protests, which was kind of hard to navigate. But I ended up talking to her, and it worked out. But it's weird because a lot of people didn't really know what they were supporting. And I had a lot of Jewish friends who would go to these pro-Palestine protests and ask the people, do you know what you're chanting? Do you know what it means? And they had no idea. It was kind of a follow the crowd situation. So it's been interesting to navigate.
Did you feel like you had enough information to have the conversation with people?
Yeah, and our Chabad program and our Hillel program was really great at putting together things. We had a lot of Jewish unity things, and a lot of people stood together. So the Jewish community stayed very, very strong. It was just kind of split in half on campus.
Before the protest, they were
Just
putting
talk
up
in the
tables
mic.
for all the hostages.
Putting up what?
Emory was very, pro-Israel. Before the protest started, they were putting up tables for all the hostages, Shabbat tables.
Oh, the Shabbat table like we have downstairs.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. So they were doing a lot of that, and really wasn't until 2 weeks before school ended when the van appeared and dropped off the hired protesters and setting up tents. That's kind of when it all started.
So what you guys were saying is that the transition wasn't right after October 7th. It was actually this spring, late in the semester this spring. Yeah, when a lot of the protests started. The day I realized something was changing was actually the day of the first Seder. I'm good.
No, I'm going to
Okay.
grab the questions from
it.
downstairs. That's why I'm handing it to you.
I have the question. Oh. Yeah. So we were in the city we were on the Upper West Side. Columbia was a few blocks away, and things were just getting going, and it was uh-oh, something's going on here, and then it sort of spread. Yeah, that was sort of the time frame. Okay. Yeah, please, let's go, April. Yeah.
How do you navigate who to go to? I think, obviously, I wrote a letter to the administration, the president, whatever. I called the Rabbi Echelel and Ahmad, and many people did. But how do you know how to navigate it? And what if the administration isn't doing stuff to help this situation?
Great. Here, Larry, hold on. I'm asking everybody to use a microphone just because we have people on live stream.
So
Make sure they can
this is
hear.
for all current students and students going into a university. How do you feel identifying as a Jew? Are you afraid to wear a Jewish star on campus? Are you afraid to put a mezuzah on your door? Yes, she has a mezuzah on her door. But do you want to be a cryptic Jew? Do you want to hide that you're Jewish just to avoid conflict and people yelling at you?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, Alexis, go ahead.
Is a Lebanese Christian.
Yeah, but her boyfriend's from Kuwait. Is from Kuwait. Yeah, and we have a lot of exchange students who are from the Middle East as well, so that's why it's such a huge divide. What was the question?
Is there like a range of how you see other Jewish students responding with their comfort level? Like we gotta think about, projecting their Judaism versus being sort of quiet or not wear
I think that honestly depends on the person. Like, I know a couple friends who took off their Star of Davids, but I also know a lot of people who stood like very strongly in their beliefs and like started like I said, like going up to these protesters, like asking them what they believe, or like standing, observing, and trying to like educate themselves as much as possible so that they could retaliate stronger. And a lot of people, like of my friends, also organize like Jewish unity things as well. So I think the majority of people I know stood stronger in their Judaism and tried to use it to like amplify our message. But there are definitely some people who get scared and take off Star of Davids.
All the Jewish students stood in the quad after they. All the Jewish students stood in the quad after they had sprayed graffiti all over the university and sang Hatikva, right?
That's nice. Okay, love it. All right, a couple more questions or stories or experiences before we start to dig into answering some of these.
We had a question from online saying it's hard to send a child off to campus for the first time. With that said, how do we sort through what's actually happening and what's represented in the media? Still hard to hear on the stream? Okay.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Danny and Mary.
Hard to hear online. Okay, we'll try to speak louder, and if you have the microphone, just try to make sure you can be heard online. Yes.
Eileen, you still need the microphone.
Oh, hi, I'm Eileen. I am the grandmother of 2 college students, both of whom who are in the sciences, who have not, at different schools, who have not been experiencing personally these issues. They've been busy studying for finals, et cetera. Big thing for me. I was a college professor. My question is, how comfortable are you as students, or would you be as students, to approach your professors to deal with these issues in classes?
So the how can I approach someone is friend, professor, I understand, but like, obviously it's very different the way you might approach a friend versus the way you might approach a professor. I'm not sure which is easier and which is harder, by the way. I'm not saying that one is easier and one is harder. They each have their own particular challenges. April, yeah.
I just want to add to that, what if you have a professor that appears to be pro-Palestinian and is, like I've heard some stories, again, not firsthand, but that they're teaching things in a different way than we would look at them.
So I would reframe that as, what if my professor says, or does, okay, but or does. We've jumped into using the word pro-Palestine here.
Careful, and you said pro-Palestinian.
Oh, that's interesting.
And I heard,
Is there, all right. So I don't know that there's such a difference. I don't know that there's such a difference. Hello, nice to see you. I am pro-Palestine. I will raise my hand proudly high. What I mean by that is, I believe that there should be a Palestinian state. I believe that the rights of Palestinians, like the rights of all human beings, should be respected. I've said that many times in this room, from this bima, written it. So I just want to hone what we mean by pro-Palestine.
and I think there's also a differentiation between pro-Palestine and free Palestine. Because I can be pro-Palestine, a state of Palestine, or a place for Palestinians to live and call their own. Also, the state of Israel was called Palestine pre-1948. So it also gets confusing when you're saying, what are we talking about when we're saying we're pro-Palestine? Are we pro a state that takes over Israel and Israel no longer exists? Because the nuance then becomes, where are we talking about this pro-Palestinian state? And we're saying free Palestine. Who are we freeing Palestine from?
Okay, there's a lot in there.
Right, no, I know, but there are two different
So,
conversations.
So wait. I'm in the middle of this.
Great.
I'm in the middle of this. Please, 1 second, okay? So I first want to say, it is totally possible to be Zionist, which I am, support the state of Israel, and also be supportive of Palestinians and Palestinian rights and a Palestinian state. Totally possible. Where I want to draw a distinction, which I think is what Rabbi was getting toward, is statements that as they are trying to be supportive of Palestine and Palestinians, also end up being against the state of Israel and against Jews and hurtful and harmful. So, for example, what are some of the most common chants at some of these rallies? Some of you have heard some of that. What's a common chant that you might know, that whether you've heard it yourself, or you read it, or you've seen it online, or whatever, that is used? From the river to the sea, what? No. So I got the rest of it. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. What does that even mean? I don't have blue, but okay. Here's the state of Israel. The river is the Jordan River, which forms the part of the eastern boundary of Israel. The sea is the Mediterranean Sea, which forms the eastern boundary of the state of Israel. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. What does that mean? So to many of the people chanting it, it means erasing the state of Israel and making all of this Palestine. When I say I'm pro-Palestine, that is not what I mean. But this is what the statement originally means. Some students, some people, some protesters, whoever they are, might say, well, I don't really mean it that way. Well, when I hear it, and I'll say me personally, when I hear it as erasing, and I did that intentionally, erasing the state of Israel in order to create a country called Palestine. And I just want to be clear, to me, it's not erasing like a flag. It's erasing half the Jewish population of the world. The Jews in the world basically live in Israel and in the United States, or call it North America if you include Canada. If you want to be literal, it's about 48% in Israel and something like 48%. It's like basically all the Jews in the world live in Israel and the United States. And if you were to erase Israel, you're getting rid of half the Jews in the world. A very scary thought. What's another chant?
But
Oh, you want to add one thing?
Yeah, I think there's also the complication of who are the people that who is trying to be free, and where do they currently live, and where are they trying to go? So it's the boundary of Israel, but it's also who are we talking about when we're talking about free Palestine? What group of people are we
We
talking
didn't
about?
say, it wasn't free Palestine. This is from the river to the sea.
Oh, from the river to the sea.
What's
Okay.
another chant that you guys have heard? Free Palestine. Okay. What might free Palestine mean? I will actually suggest that it could mean this many things, from this end to that end. It could mean I'm in favor of a Palestinian state and making sure Palestinians have all their rights. Well, I just said I'm in favor of that. Or it could mean what I'm contending from the river to the sea means. Let me just be clear one thing historically and politically. Again, if that is Israel, I'll use, perfect, I have green. The West Bank kind of looks like that. That's kind of, I'm bad drawer there. This is where Gaza is. And for the past 35 years or so, Israel's official position, the state of Israel's official position is we don't want to hold on to the West Bank and Gaza forever. We want to move toward creating an independent Palestinian country, otherwise known as a Palestinian state, next to Israel that will live in peace and security side by side with us. That's been the official policy of the state of Israel going, and for the last 30 years and probably more. So, free Palestine could mean it's time to give the Palestinians their own country. Would I agree with that? Totally, as long as it doesn't threaten Israel. By the way, I would say Israel shouldn't threaten it. Goes both ways. But if free Palestine means all of this, which is currently Israel, and which some say should belong to the Palestinians, no longer becomes, again, the Jewish state of Israel, and all of it should be this country called Palestine, well, I cannot support that. Go ahead, Eileen. Question?
Yeah, I'm thinking about what's going on in Israel.
Yeah, hold on one second. Just use a microphone so that we can.
I think what has to be added to this mix is what's going on in Israel, in the government in Israel. I view things as an American Jew who has an interest in Israel. I'm not a Zionist, I will admit. I
You're
am
not a Zionist.
No, I'm not a
Okay.
Zionist. I'd be living in Israel if I were a Zionist. That's how I feel. My concern is, what is the current Israeli government doing that mitigates against what you're talking?
Yes. Okay, lots of things in here. Number one, there are shades of definitions to Zionism, but generally, if a person believes that there should be a Jewish state in the land of Israel, that's Zionism. You don't have to live in Israel. You don't have to live there. You don't have to live there to be a Zionist. So I want to expand the definition of Zionism for a moment. You're asking a really important question. What is legitimate criticism of Israel?
Seriously.
And what?
No, seriously, that's
Yes.
very important
I
to me.
agree. I agree. What qualifies as legitimate criticism of Israel, and what qualifies as anti-Zionism or anti-Israel or delegitimization of Israel, which is a fancy way of saying claiming that the state of Israel doesn't have a right to exist anymore. So what I would say is it is perfectly legitimate to criticize an action or policy or words of Israel or its leaders. I don't like that Israel does such and such. By the way, we say that about the United States. We could say that about France or Mexico or Great Britain or China or any other country on earth. I don't like that they do such and such. There are many things that I would say I don't like that the state of Israel does. I don't like, for example, the fact that the state of Israel often seems not to respect the rights of Palestinians. That is very different from saying that Israel does not have the right to exist. And people say that in these protests in different ways. So, for example, if the word genocide or the word apartheid is used in relation to Israel, I believe that's a delegitimization. Essentially, painting Israel as so evil that it does not deserve to exist anymore. By the way, that's separate from the fact that it is totally factually untrue that Israel practices apartheid or that Israel has anything to do with genocide. Totally untrue.
Another thing that's left out of this discussion is support for Hamas, that many of these young people put up signs that, and I don't know who these young people are, or who they're being supported by financially. It's another whole issue. But the whole issue of confusing Free Palestine, pro-Palestine, with pro-Hamas. Hamas, a terrorist organization, and it's been labeled
I
as
think, Eileen, it's also often, and Rabbi Friedman and I have talked about that, both of us would say we are in favor of saying free Palestinians from Hamas. And I think that when we separate out the nuance of what the conversation is, and like Rabbi Friedman says, the answer is this wide, when we parse out the individual pieces of what Free Palestine means, there are many aspects of it that we would agree with. It's when it's said as a blanket statement that it becomes untrue or you can't, like it doesn't make sense. And that's when it becomes problematic. Amy.
Hello, everyone on the live stream. My question is, when does being anti-Zionist become anti-Semitic, or what's the connection there? Because that's something, like, I'd like to give these protesters some grace and say, I don't think they're being anti-Semitic. I think they're anti-Zionist, and those are two different issues. So I'd like to understand, are they two different issues, or is it something entirely different? Thank you.
Sure. I have a particular perspective on this. I don't think it's a unique perspective, but I'll say something broad and then I'll give you some examples. When Israel is treated as the outcast among the nations, just like Jews have in our worst days been treated as the outcast among human beings, that is anti-Semitism. So, for example, people on campus, and I'll say people because sometimes it's students, sometimes it's folks from the outside, are protesting against Israel. How many other countries are there in the world? How many countries in the world are there that do terrible things? Betsy's saying every single one of them, right? We could say, if you want to make a list of the worst countries in the world, who would be on that list? North Korea, Syria, Iran, Venezuela. I mean, we could have a long list. If Israel is the sole country on a college campus that's being protested, not Russia for its invasion of Ukraine, not China for how it treats 2 million Uyghurs, and let alone all sorts of other issues, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, I would suggest that in itself is anti-Semitic. To focus on the evil deeds, quote unquote, evil deeds of the Jewish state, without regard to the evil deeds of every other nation, just replace state with Jew, and boom, that's your formula. That's just like singling Jews out for blame for the problems of the world, which is the anti-Semitic formula forever and ever and ever. You want to say that Israel should be better than it is today? I'm right there with you. You want to say Israel should have, there's lots of things that we could say that I will be right there with anybody who's there on campus. But if you want to say that Israel is like the lone bad actor in the world that deserves our attention, our focus, our divestment, we haven't written, did we write what is divestment? We didn't write that up there. It's on my list, but it's not up here yet. We should divest from Israel, let alone, as I said, China, Russia, Syria, Iran, but like all these other nations. To me, that's the specific targeting of Israel, parallel to the specific targeting of Jews, to the exclusion of all other people or all other nations. To me, that itself is anti-Semitic. Let alone, I would say, I also want to contend that the use of the word genocide is anti-Semitic in regard to Israel, because as we all know, the paradigmatic human example of genocide, the Holocaust, happened to us. To then turn that around and accuse Israel with, it's completely untrue, of that same crime is also itself, I would say, anti-Semitic. Okay, Rabbi, you want to take one? Or two?
I was going to share a question that we had online, but
Great.
one of the questions was, what are the limits of free speech? Who had that question? Anyone remember? Because there's context.
I think that was on my list. I put that up.
Great. So I'll let you answer it. So Ben Frimmer asked via the live stream what's happening versus what the media is reporting. And I think, unfortunately, when we see things on the media, something that I've been taught since I was very young was that often we portray ourselves we see ourselves on our worst day when we're looking at ourselves, and it looks like everyone else is on their best day. And I think, unfortunately, the media also portrays that Hamas or whoever is doing their social media is really good at what they're doing. And when you are doing a media campaign and you know how to do it and you do it well, then the information that you're sharing is very successful. And it's really hard to combat, 2,000 people died in Gaza today, or X number of people were murdered, or whatever it might be, when what we're hearing from Israel or from the IDF is we're fighting a just war, X number of people died because we're doing an offensive against X place in Gaza, and it becomes he said, she said, as opposed to here's the truth. And American media, or media in general, is biased against Israel. So almost exclusively in most media outlets, whatever you hear is going to be biased against Israel. There are certain websites, mostly Israeli ones, that are going to give you a more accurate perception of what's actually happening. But most of what you're going to see on social media is coming from a biased source, and therefore giving you biased information. So most people who are getting their news from social media, which unfortunately is many of our teenagers, their news is biased because it's only the perspective and perception that is being shared by these skewed medias. Does that make sense? So the antidote to that is start following other media that is going to share a slightly less biased perspective. So the Times of Israel is an Israeli-based English newspaper that you can follow, you can get more accurate information, and you can hear more about what's happening in Israel and what Israel is doing in the war. You can also follow other Israeli newspapers, but that's the one that I would say is easiest to follow and has the best English media presence. Ben, you can text me if you have more questions or if that wasn't clear, and I will continue to clarify. I'm talking to him from there. But media reporting in general is really complicated because also we hear one snippet of information, take it and run with it. And I think that's where, unfortunately, where a lot of this stems from. So Alexis, you were saying that on campus, most people didn't know what they were protesting, right? Because it's easy to mass text people and say, show up here, we're protesting. And it's exciting to be on a college campus and show up somewhere and be with a bunch of other people. It's really hard to actually say what you're fighting for. And that's why part of the conversation and part of the unfortunate or challenging responsibility as Jews is to say, well, why are you doing that? What do you believe? And that, Madison, we talked about that a little bit too. And I think understanding that it's okay to challenge someone, to say, we're friends, I don't understand. Can you help me better understand? And Deb Goldenberg, that speaks to your question as well. Deb asked, how do we have a conversation with someone who says, but I can't talk to you because we don't agree? And it's the more we ask, but what do you believe? But what do you understand? We can have a dialogue. And I think that, by the way, is this question. How can I approach someone? The more we approach someone open-mindedly, the more we are willing to say, I want to learn and understand. I'm not here to judge you. I'm here to better understand. And I hope that we can both listen to understand each other. That's what creates opportunities for dialogue, for relationship, and that's where it goes deeper for you. And hopefully the other person can learn as well.
I want to address these two questions in parallel. So, are there any limits to free speech? Okay, give me an example. What's a limit? I saw Madison nodding. If it puts other people in direct harm. There's a more complex legal way to say it, but what I've been taught is if it puts other people in direct harm. The classic example is yelling fire in a crowded theater that causes the entire theater to stampede the exits and people could get hurt. The challenge is the connection between the speech and the action, right? If I stand in the middle of campus and say, kill all the Jews, is that free speech or is that hate speech? It's actually free speech. If I don't have a gun and I'm not shooting a Jew in the middle of it, I actually can say it. If I don't have a mob, an armed mob going and doing it at that moment, I actually can say it. As distasteful as that is. The reason I connect these two questions, so I want to note that there may be lots of speech with which I disagree, find hurtful, and even find harmful, which are different, I'll call it slices, but yet are still within the realm of protected free speech. The difference is you guys are on university campuses or will be on university campuses. And universities have already defined in many ways that you can't just say whatever you want. And part of the challenge as I see it, part of the problem as I see it is that universities which would not allow people to say or do things against Black people, LGBTQ individuals, women, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Universities which would act to limit speech or actions that target any of those groups have not applied the same standards to speech or actions against Jews. Universities have essentially said, even though we support free speech, we have a responsibility to keep people safe, and we're going to do it by saying that certain speech and certain actions is not allowed here. And I believe that's the key to some of these other questions. What if my professor says? Who do I go to? How can I respond, etc.? Which is holding the university to its own standards. If you're not going to allow the university, if the university isn't going to allow people to say things that are offensive and harmful to Black people, to women, to LGBTQ individuals, the same standard has to be applied to Jews. That's it. Go ahead.
I hear you. I understand what you're saying. And I did buy one of the books you recommended in the fall, and I'm reading it now, Israel. And I'm always
The Noah
looking,
Tishby book.
yeah,
I think so, or Daniel.
I hope so. It's
Sokach,
really good.
one of
No,
those.
what
Okay.
it's giving a
One of the Israel
wonderful
books. Okay.
history because I always go from what's happening now, and I don't necessarily ask the question why, but yeah, why, but like, where did it start? What like,
Oh.
what's so that's where I just kind of like throw my hands up in the air. Not that I'm giving up, but I don't understand, and I never have.
Okay, just gonna jot that down about the start of the conflict, okay? Okay. I want to ask, one second. Has anybody been in the situation of approaching someone, friend, a professor, an administrator, et cetera? Or can you imagine being in?
So I'm going to share, can I share for you? So Madison called me, Kate, we were coming home from MTI, when was that? In November. So
March or
Madison called
November?
me. So Madison called me at the beginning of the year and said, I have a friend and we're really close and they're talking about protesting, right?
Yeah, she was very outwardly spoken about being pro-Palestine.
See, I knew I'd get you started if you started.
Okay.
She was very outwardly spoken in person and on social media, and she would like wear shirts and necklaces and different things. She is Palestinian. But it made me and a lot of my friends who are Jewish, I go to a very Jewish university, which I'm very lucky to be attending, but so I would say
Right.
like 70% of my friends are Jewish.
Right.
And a lot of us are friends with this girl, and we all felt uncomfortable being around her.
Now, can I ask a clarifying question here? Where was her, I'm trying to think about what the question is. It's been a long day. Where does it cross the line from her own free freedom of expression, especially according to her ethnic identity? Where does it cross the line from a reasonable expression of her ethnic identity to something that is hurtful or offensive?
Yeah, I don't think she was ever like intentionally trying to hurt us. I think it made us more uncomfortable
Right?
than it did like cause us harm.
Right? Okay.
It was just very unsettling to have a conversation with her.
Uh-huh. Can you give an example?
I haven't spoken to her in a while.
Uh-huh. Okay. Right. So it became difficult to have a conversation
It
with
was
her.
very
Sure.
challenging.
Sure.
It was a very natural drift apart, I think. There was one day where there was a protest and it was like, everyone is gonna walk out of class at this time if you support. I was in that class with her and she got up and left. Didn't say a word, she just left. And that was kind of it. We never looped back about it.
But you also asked me, do I go to anyone? It's making me uncomfortable. Do I talk to anyone on campus? Who can I go to? And how do I find supportive resources? Because we are friends and I want to know how to talk about it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the more important thing
Yes.
is, yes, you can drift apart, but you need those resources and that strength to have the conversation. Because it's way harder to think about the conversation and the anxiety behind, am I gonna have the conversation? What am I gonna say? How are they gonna respond? What's gonna happen to me? It's really hard to try to have the conversation
Right.
in your head than actually having it often.
Yeah.
I also think it's really hard. I mean, you're expressing it well. It's really hard to determine where does discomfort cross the line into something that's offensive or harmful.
Yeah.
I'll tell a story because I had similar experiences. Over the past many years, Temple Israel has developed a very nice relationship, or I should say had developed a very nice relationship with the Bridgeport Islamic Cultural Center, which is the largest mosque in the state of Connecticut. I've been there many times, probably like a half dozen times at least, for different events, social justice events, Eid events, etc., interfaith events. We've done all sorts of justice work together. Just one example is that I had heard, I'll try to make the whole story short. When I first came to Westport, members of Temple Israel had told me stories about when they moved here in the 80s, the school districts didn't yet give off vacation for Jewish holidays, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and there was a whole process with the school board to get those onto those calendars in Westport and Weston. And a couple of years ago, it was like just post-pandemic, I got a call from the chief social justice leader in our community organizing work from Bridgeport Islamic Cultural Center, and he said, hey, we're going to mount this campaign to get Muslim holidays on school calendars in Bridgeport, Fairfield, and Trumbull. And immediately, I thought of the stories that Temple Israel members had told me about when they came here in the 80s and 90s. I said, we are with you. We will be there. And I was at some of those meetings and some of our other, et cetera, et cetera. So we've done social justice work together. And then right after October 7th, the mosque sponsored and amplified, meaning on their public Facebook page, they posted videos of rallies in Bridgeport at which some of these terrible things that we're talking about, very offensive things, not, much worse than Free Palestine, were chanted and said. And I had the same reaction. I, who am trained from the time I was 16 years old in interfaith dialogue, found myself completely unable to engage in dialogue with Mustafa, who's the key leader who I just mentioned a moment ago, and others. So I feel you. And I'm a trained professional in this. It is hard. It is really hard. We are just now at the point where we are able to have some initial conversations, and next Wednesday we have a full meeting of the leadership of the Jewish community and Bridgeport Islamic Cultural Center leadership to take the next steps in trying to rebuild our relationship. When I think about that meeting, which will be next Wednesday night, I have a little bit of trepidation of even though I've known these people, even though we've sat one-to-one recently and talked about our families and talked about Passover and Ramadan and the immigrant experience and all sorts of things, now when we're really going to get down to it. But I want to share one more thing. In the midst of this difficult, period of time between the Jewish community and BICC, I don't know who the they is actually. Someone purchased a billboard on I-95 in Bridgeport. And it had the Palestinian flag, it had Palestinian colors, and it said, "Save Palestinian children." And somebody sent it to me and said, essentially, what do you think? Isn't this so terrible? And I looked at it and I said, it's not my favorite thing in the world, but it's free speech. It's not anti-Israel. And guess what? I too would say that we should save Palestinian children. They do not deserve to be harmed. They do not deserve to die. No children anywhere deserve to be harmed or die. So as much as I might not like that people on I-95 are driving past a Palestinian flag, a million cars a day are driving past a Palestinian flag, guess what? I have to respect the message they chose and their right to say it. And if we in the Jewish community really care that much, guess what? We can buy a bigger billboard. So this is where I'm really trying to make a distinction between what is speech that makes me a little uncomfortable, but I have to respect their right to say, versus speech that crosses the line, like some of the speech at the rallies that I was mentioning back in October and November. Sorry, that was a long story, but yeah, Mark.
Hold on.
Please.
Can I put you on the spot, Rabbi, and ask you, what advice would you give to Madison for how to handle that exact situation she was describing?
I will answer with the advice that I'm trying to give myself, which is to be a little thick-skinned and to respect the right of somebody else to believe something that I don't totally agree with, but to distinguish between that and something that's really offensive. So I'm trying to, as I think about that conversation next Wednesday with the leaders of Bridgeport Islamic Cultural Center, I'm thinking about how do I make that distinction?
I will also say, for many of you who are not yet on campus, this is all not yet a reality. So you might have had this conversation at school, or you might have faced the thought of this conversation, but doing it at home, when you can go home, talk to your parents, and at night get away from it, is very different than being on a college campus, and there's no getting away from protests. And I want to say it's also okay to say, I don't have the answers and I'm not comfortable engaging in this conversation right now. I need to get more information. So Madison, when you called me, you were getting more information, right? That is incredible. Anyone saying, I don't know enough and I need more information, it's totally appropriate to say. And I think, Jacob, you said, I'm not sure I'm invested enough. It's also okay to be a Jew on campus and say, I don't really know how I feel about Israel. I wouldn't probably go around saying that out loud to many people because people feel so strongly about Israel right now. But it's also okay to say, I don't know how I feel. Personally, I went to college. When I went to college, I didn't talk to any Israel organization. Anytime anyone came up to me, I walked the other direction because I didn't have enough information to know which Israel organization I should be talking to. And I was terrified I was going to choose the wrong one that had a nuanced perspective that I didn't understand. It's also okay to say, I don't know, and ask questions. And that's why we are here. That's why those of you who know Kate is here. We are here to help you because it's terrifying to walk into college and talk about an issue like Israel that is so convoluted, and there are so many, it's the wrong word, there's so many parts that you can step your foot in and not completely understand what you're talking about. So it is okay to ask questions. It's okay to say, I don't know, or I want to have this conversation. Can we have it tomorrow? It's okay to do that. It's also okay to say, I'm not ready to have the conversation, period. I want to give you all permission to say that because this is terrifying to say you're 18 and you need to know the answers to everything about Israel and Palestine, or Israel and Gaza and the Palestinian conflict. That's absurd. So I want to give you permission to say, I don't know the answers, and that's okay. Okay?
And I'll just add one more layer here, which is we don't actually have to talk about the political issue or the conflict. I want to suggest that there's opportunity just to get to know. It's like an invitation to ask personal questions. Oh, I know your family is Palestinian. Tell me, where are they from? Tell me your family's story. Do you have relatives who are still there? Have you ever visited them? Oh, I went to Israel once. Oh, I have relatives in Israel. And we find points of commonality without having to talk about Israel, Hamas, the war, who's wrong, who's right, what a two-state solution might look like, etc. What's your favorite Palestinian food? Oh, my favorite Jewish food is.
Yeah. I think it also makes it a safer conversation.
Exactly.
I see you.
I can share an experience I had in which I sort of was confronted with this conflict and tried to sort of engage in a conversation. But last year I went to a semester school, so sort of in like a quasi-college experience, was living in like a dorm with people, and it was a program that was very focused around like political science, and there would be like case studies each week about different topics, and they would bring in different sort of political leaders to speak from both sides of the conflict. And so one of the weeks was the Israel-Palestine conflict, and this was last fall, so it was before October 7th, and to be honest, I wasn't so directly educated. Like, I've since tried to inform myself more, but it was definitely awkward to be part of those conversations, but it sort of culminated in, and we like spoke with government representatives and diplomats from both like the Israeli government and the Palestinian government. And then like when we were eating dinner at night, one of my very close friends who was also Jewish came downstairs wearing, just like we were all in our pajamas eating dinner, and she came downstairs wearing an IDF t-shirt, which she had just gotten from just like visiting Israel as a tourist and as a Jew. And two of our classmates in this program like sort of freaked out and got very uncomfortable and basically like said, how could you do this? These were both classmates with Palestinian family members, and they both sort of like broke down and freaked out and ran upstairs and were like, how could you do that? That was so inconsiderate. Like, how could you represent this genocidal organization, especially while we're talking about these issues? And my friend was like, I was just wearing my pajamas. Like, I didn't mean to start this. And it was really scary to sort of feel like the bad guy in this situation. Like, I know I'm not supposed to, but it sort of feels like within these two sides of the conflict, and particularly in a very, very like liberal setting, it sort of felt like, oh, if you're supporting Israel, you're automatically the bad guy. And so I sort of tried to push that, and I was like, to my friend Eva, I was like, Eva, I think we should go upstairs. I think this is a good opportunity to try and have a conversation with them about this. And we sort of went upstairs and tried to be like, hey, we're both Jewish and we feel very strong connections to Israel, and like we have to admit that we've grown up with, I'm sure, like inherent bias about this, and you with Palestinian family have your own inherent bias to this, and we'd like to have a conversation. And they were sort of like, we can't talk to you about this. Like, there is no bias. There's only the black and white to this situation. And I tried to like sort of press and ask questions about like, well, this is my perspective of how I've been, like how my family talks about this, how my like Jewish education here at the temple has talked about this. And I realized that we actually had a lot of just like factual discrepancies in like what my Jewish education and what their Palestinian education, their family has been like, of just like, when was Israel founded? Why was Israel founded? All of this stuff. And I think it was definitely a more productive conversation for me than for them, because honestly, they were not really receptive to what me and my friend had to say. But I think it was a difficult experience to have to confront them with this. And it was very difficult to have to live with this of like one of these girls I shared a bunk bed with. Like, she slept above me for like months after that. And it was very uncomfortable and like very difficult to sort of walk through. And there were like lots like other comments or things she said to us about being Jewish or other people throughout the semester. But I think it was very impactful, at least for me, to just have that conversation and ask those questions.
I really respect you, Mira, for stepping into a difficult conversation. I think this is such an important question about the possibility of being in dialogue with people with whom we might disagree. I mean, Israel-Palestine is the least of it, you know? Can we talk to someone who supports Donald Trump and wants to vote for him, you know? Or are we like refusing to talk across that line of political difference? I would suggest that college, if anything, is a time to explore conversations across lines of difference, of identity, of political commitment, of all sorts of things, And so I'm so glad that you wanted to be the person who wanted to step into that difficult conversation. If we're being honest, there are times when we are on the other side, where we are the girl who slept above you and didn't want to talk. I can't talk about this. I can't even talk to you. If we're being honest, there are times when where we're not willing to step into that conversation. So I hope that we are strong enough and courageous enough and curious enough to be willing to step into that conversation when we have the opportunity. Because I think only that can help heal the world. Maybe we have like, it's getting close to 8:45. Maybe like one or two more. Go Go ahead.
I have a question that
Yes.
directly correlates to this. Is there a respectful way to ask somebody why they might feel a certain way without maybe engaging in any sort of conflict or just trying to have like some sort of peaceful conversation about what's going on?
That's great. Who has an idea? Yes.
Hi, I'm
I don't
Noah.
think everybody might know who you are, so you want to introduce yourself, Noah?
I'm Noah Nemitov Bressler, married to Rabbi NB. There was a couple things that I thought of, and it kind of relates to what you just asked. One is approach with curiosity, and to make it clear what your intention is at the beginning, and to say, you know, I'd like to ask you some questions if you're willing to talk, because I'm curious to learn about your perspective. And not that you're trying to push your perspective, but just listen. And it doesn't even have to be okay, now let me share, right? So that's part of it. But also, you know, all this discussion of discomfort, like this made me uncomfortable, but I don't know if it was harmful or hurtful or where that line is, made me think about my time as a ropes course facilitator, and when I used to talk to kids before they went up, you know, on whatever climbing element it was, I'd talk about, you could think of 3 concentric circles. The middle one is your comfort zone. Outside of that is the growth zone. So you have to step outside your comfort zone to grow. But outside of that is the panic zone. And that's when I have to climb up and bring a kid down off of the wall when they got too high, right? And you don't really know where those boundaries are, and they shift from day to day and moment to moment. But you also have to be able to come back into your comfort zone in order to grow. You can't live outside your comfort zone. So having those safe places and people on campus and in your life are going to be important so that you can step outside your comfort zone, talk to people, learn and grow, and then be able to come back and regroup. And I think part of the problem is that a lot of people feel like they don't have that safe space on campus now, especially Jews. And so it's just living outside your comfort zone all the time is just stressful and anxiety inducing and not something people can do for long periods of time. That's what I wanted to share.
Lindsay, I think another thing, not only approaching with curiosity, but also saying, what I heard you saying is this. Is that accurate? Can you help me understand more? And that's a lot of tell me about. When we say, you said this, and blaming, it's not successful. And you know that because anytime you're in a conversation with a friend and you're saying, you, or that's never gonna help. I heard this, I'm understanding this, it doesn't quite make sense to me, can you help me? And then they are able to be in the position of teaching you, and it becomes you listening. Now that's hard to put yourself in that role, but it often makes people more open or willing. Betsy, I wonder if you have anything to share as a therapist in terms of how to have that conversation? Hold on.
Thank you. No, I like the way you said that. And what that says to me is when you have a secure base, whether it's friendships or home or parents that you can call or going home, then you are able to venture outside of that zone. And that's really kind of how we start as little people. It's called secure attachment. One thing I want to focus on to answer your question is that something you said 10, 15 minutes ago was around keeping it simple. Because here we are, a bunch of pretty smart people trying to tackle something enormous. And I don't know about you, I'm like, oh my God, where do we go? How do we start? So like, what's your favorite food? Or can we have a conversation about, you know, what does the map of Israel look like? That might be too complicated. No, forget it.
Do not get into that.
No, but.
Where in Palestine is your family from? Where's your?
Yeah, what are you making for dinner?
Yeah. When did your family come here to the United States?
And small bites, small little sips, so that you can find that common ground you were talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone's.
And by the way, your roommate might be from someplace in Africa. Your roommate might be from someplace in Asia. I would think the same questions would apply. Tell me about growing up in Nigeria. Do your parents still live in China? When did they come over here? You know, like, what's your favorite food what's your favorite Indian food? That, you know, there's like all sorts of these questions that when, asked about I'll call it there's like these are kind of like normal human curiosity, tell me about questions, but all of a sudden when they're placed onto the conflict between Israel and Palestine, now, oh my God, they get so charged. I want to sort of like remove some of that anxiety.
Kate,
And
I
also,
think
I just wanted to add something to what you said of, like, you're from here, you might have a roommate who's from, Timbuktu. You also might have a roommate from the next town and have different opinions and different life experiences as
God.
well. So we're
A
not,
Republican. Oh my God.
there's not a homogeneity even within the groups that people see as having full agreement on things.
Kate had a response to Lindsay, and then Amy.
And then Amy, and then maybe we'll.
So something that Rabbi MB and I have learned a lot about this year is nonviolent communication. Marshall Rosenberg, I think, is the gentleman who crafted it. If you haven't looked into it or read about it, it's a lot of the techniques that have already been mentioned. And the last one that I think is really important in these kinds of conversations is the idea of asking permission. Are you okay if we have a difficult conversation about this topic right now? And sometimes it feels a little awkward or stilted, especially if you're in that teen, young adult age. But I think it warns the person, like, I want to engage in a conversation that might be difficult, and gives them the opportunity to opt out before you get so deep into it that now you're arguing and just walking away from some difficult conversation or argument. And I think that can be a much healthier way to approach it. And if they say no, say, is there a time that you might be willing to have that conversation? Because maybe the answer is no because they have a big exam tomorrow, not because they don't want to have it. And so that's another technique that often can be helpful.
I just wanted to address Madison, not to pick on you, but you're at my alma mater, so I feel like we need to do big things there. But I will say this, and I'm an employment lawyer, so I teach men how not to harass women. So I deal with conflict all the time. And I also think that that's why this is like such a big deal, because all of a sudden white men are being discriminated against and they have no idea how to handle it. Like, I feel like women are like, we're harassed all the time, like, whatever. But what I would say, when I was at school, I took a Holocaust class, and my professor was German, okay? And whoa, and I took it with all the Jewish girls from Lehigh. And at first we were like, what are we doing? And this can't, and I'm the freedom fighter, and I'm like, we're bringing this to the administration. But what I learned, one, this woman was gonna give me my grade for the semester, so I better be on her good side. So I can imagine what you felt like when one of your professors is supporting the other side, right? So that's uncomfortable because you're worried. And this happens in business too. You have a boss that is harassing and discriminating against you. How do you manage that, right? So what I learned in that class was I used it as an opportunity to learn about the other side. This wasn't my hill to fight. This wasn't the opportunity where I was gonna change someone's mind. That's not the venue. You sit in the class, you listen to the professor, maybe in your essays that you write, you say, you know what, I heard what you said, but I disagree with it in this way, so that you're preserving your grade, because I know that that's what you're all most concerned about more than anything else. So I would say that. And then what's interesting to me is that you were concerned about this other student that had a differing point of view. And I think it's like what the rabbi was saying, like, why, I'm more interested, why did you feel uncomfortable? But also what I would say is put yourself in that student's shoes and be compassionate for them, because just as much as you're feeling in the spotlight, like I'm doing to you right now, sorry, they are also feeling like they're in the spotlight. That's why this is so charged. Everyone feels like they're in silos. So while I want everyone to start engaging in conversations, and I'm so thrilled that you're going to the mosque, Rabbi, I think that's the absolute right thing to do. We should be engaging in conversations with people on the other side. If it's not the right opportunity, that's okay. But I think the more you do approach it with curiosity, like everyone's saying, I think the more productive it's gonna be. And my final comment, if you're really getting into it with someone, people pay me a lot of money for this advice. The best thing, if someone's bullying you under any circumstance, but this one in particular, one of my favorite responses is, I don't know how to respond to that. It takes the winds out of people's sails every time, every time.
And that's why, for all of you going off to college, we are not offering this now, but anyone who would be interested in learning more about Israel and having a conversation about this conflict and understanding it, that is an option. And we want to help you have that conversation. And that's those of you in this room, those of you on the live stream. this is complicated. And as Rabbi Friedman said, we don't need all of the pieces of the whole Israeli-Palestinian conflict to have this conversation, but it is helpful to have facts. And everyone's facts seem a little different right now, which makes it hard. Someone on the live stream also clarified that the right-wing media often says very helpful things about Israel, and that what they're saying is often accurate about what's going on in Israel. And I will say that not a lot, some of what we were saying was opinion too. Like, we're saying one perspective and not this is the one fact on what's going on here. And I want to be pretty clear that a lot of what's going on in Israel and a lot of how we feel, like Rabbi Friedman said, this is what I say, this is what I believe. And neither of us are saying this is what all of Judaism believes, because it's really important that everyone comes up with their own understanding and their own way to believe what Judaism thinks and what we think.
Thank you to Rabbi NB for putting this together and for leading us tonight. Thank you, Kate, for being here. Thank you to all you for being here. Appreciate it. I'm sure it's been a long day for everybody, so I'm happy to stick around for a couple of minutes if there's some individual questions. But otherwise, we just want you to know we are here for you no matter what happens, no matter what questions you have. Just like Madison, just like you called or texted, I don't know what it was, Rabbi NB and Kate, same thing. Do it again. Reach out to any of us. We are here no matter what. Thanks, everybody.